MLOps, and okay, I need MLOps. Now, how is it helping my cause? So if we know the issues associated with a certain model deployment, I will know exactly how MLOps is helping me. Okay, let's define the problem first. Okay, so trust me, guys, there are plenty of problems associated when we talk about a deployment, a model going into production, which is exactly the question that was raised in the paper that I talked to you about, which was published in 2015. This paper talks about different issues. Let's talk about the issues in general. Okay, now this particular model, if you look at this diagram, this pretty much sums up all the entities that are present in one machine learning life cycle. Okay, this pretty much sums it up. There is data which has to be collected, it has to be verified, there are various features in it, there are different models that need to be tested, there is resource management, there's so much that's going on. And the code part, if you observe, like Jupyter Notebook, when you do any test on Jupyter Notebook, when you do any experiment like a Titanic data set, an Iris data set, wine quality data set, there are so many data sets, common data sets on which we start off as beginners. If you observe, the coding part is very less. I mean, the data pre-processing and cleaning part, feature extraction part is huge. But think about the model. It's like import from sklearn dot blah blah blah, import this machine learning algorithm, just train your model, predict it, maybe come up with a confusion matrix, come up with its accuracy and all the precision and recall and everything. Look at that and then train it, and then that model is giving you predictions, and then save the model as a PKL file. That's it. The code part is, along with it, is the main area of concern. The first thing, let's talk about the first part, deployment issues, which is exactly what I started my session with. You are the world's best data scientist. You do amazing predictions. Okay, you are almost, you're like, people in your community call you God. Oh my God, he's like God. Whatever he says is correct. But you can't do it for others beyond your community. Forget that. You're just not able to execute it for even your community. You can just do it for yourself. Like you sit and you can watch this game of cricket and you say that, okay, this in the next over there's going to be a wicket that's going to go off, or there's going to be a huge over. Okay, like they keep doing in IPL, huge over, big over alert and stuff like that. So you can only restrict it to yourself. But what's the point? If you're working as a data scientist for a company, you should be able to put it into production. The first problem that people face is deployment issues. Not all models or all algorithms are able to cope up with the pressure or the, you can say, the diversity or the vastness of these businesses. Okay, and that is where the deployment comes into play. The second issue, which is one of the use cases which I'll explain a little later in the slide, is the monitoring issue. You have trained your model, it is doing very well. Okay, you've trained it on a certain data set, it's doing very well, and you put it into deployment. Fine, your deployment issue is resolved. You now monitor the model and see that when you were doing it in your system, the model was giving you a prediction as high, like the accuracy of prediction was as high as 98%, 99%. You deploy this into production and you see that after a few, sometimes like if it's quite vast, it can come down to 80%, and after a few weeks it can go down to as bad as 50%. So the accuracy of the model is decreasing vastly. Okay, this accuracy reduces drastically over time, and that is why there is a need to monitor the performance of your model over and over again. Even if you've trained it, you need to monitor it over and over again, because if you don't, the accuracy falls. Okay, obviously this monitoring is time consuming. It requires a lot of resources, it requires a lot of expertise. People should be able to gauge the behavior, how it is falling, how it is rising. Everything has to be, identified and analyzed. Okay, so that is one part of it. The next part that comes in is associated with businesses, model governance. So when you talk about a model that is being pushed into deployment, there are various norms, there are various thought processes, there are various, you can say, restrictions which are there. So like, if I give you the best example, if you're deploying a particular model for a particular business, okay, now say we are talking about a biomedical research organization, or maybe some digital marketing organization, and they're wanting you to predict certain features. Like if I talk about the biomedical prediction, they want you to build a web application which has a model at the back end which predicts whether this particular medicine will be beneficial in the future. Okay, a very basic raw example. For that, you have trained various algorithms, and then you see that, okay, this particular algorithm is doing really well. You need to, before you deploy it, you need to send it through various levels and various stages. There has to be approval from different, sections of the organization. There are different, audit processes which are involved. Auditing is involved. Like, okay, how much will the cost be? What are the risks associated? All that is going to come ahead. Okay, that is one more problem, which if you do it individually, is going to take up a lot of time, a lot of expensive. It's a very, very expensive process. Okay, and like again coming back to this diagram, the model code is a small part compared to the whole scenario. Okay, the code that you write is a very small part. The things associated with the code is the dominant part. Okay, so one would ask that why is DevOps not sufficient? Why can't I link DevOps with machine learning? And then I can solve my problem. I can continuously integrate it and continuously deploy whatever update has come up, and then this problem will be resolved. No, it will not be resolved, because the difference between DevOps and MLOps is that DevOps is just the code part. MLOps or machine learning is dealing with the code and the data. And trust me, guys, the code is secondary over here. No data, no code. If there is a fixed data, you can try different versions of the code, different trials can be done, you can still get some output. But imagine there's no data. Okay, imagine there is no TV. How will you expect the child to learn cricket all by himself without watching a game of cricket? Not possible, right? Okay. A major issue associated with life science. Now, this is something that we must discuss, and in the process, we'll actually identify the whole machine learning life cycle of how it starts with and where it goes. A machine learning life cycle will ideally start with acquisition of the data. You're going to be having various sources. From that source, you're going to be getting the data. Now, how do you know what data to fetch? There is supposed to be a problem statement. There is supposed to be a business problem statement, that there is a certain company which needs you to do something for them. Okay, there is a company which wants you to predict a customer churn, for instance. That what is the probability that this customer will not leave or leave our services over a certain period of time. So that is the question that has to be thrown up, and then you'll acquire data from various sources to build this model, train this model. Okay, so once that is done, you move on to the next step, which is preparation of the data. This data will be prepared in various ways. The data will be cleaned, it will be processed, it is going to have various aspects of which are going to be analyzed. Then comes data analysis. Now, this data analysis is done very well using visualization tools. There are various data visualization tools, libraries like Matplotlib, Seaborn. I'm sure you've heard of them. If you haven't, these are some of the popular libraries which help you to visualize the data. This is known as exploratory data analysis, which is EDA. The acronym is EDA. Okay. Once that is done, you know that, okay, there are 10 features in the data set, but 8 of them are really, really important for this model, okay, to predict the outcome. The target variable, okay, your target variable is heavily dependent on 8 of these 10 variables, and there are 2 variables which are not very significant. You can probably eliminate them to improve your model score. You can go ahead with that. Now, that is called feature selection. There were 10 features and you selected 8 features out of those. Okay. Once those features have been selected, you feed them to the model. The model is nothing but the algorithm. Different algorithms with different parameters, they will be tested, they will be tweaked, and then you will get the best algorithm for this particular task. Okay. Once that is done, you're set to go. This particular algorithm can be saved as a model. Okay, and then it can be deployed. Now, this is the entire life cycle that is there in a machine learning system. Now, the problems which are associated is that one person ideally will not do it. The data engineer, first of all, the subject matter expert will throw up the problem. The data engineer will be fetching the data and providing the whole data setup to the data scientist. The data scientist is good, or the data analyst for that matter. The data scientist or the data analyst will be analyzing this data in details. He's going to do exploratory data analysis, like I've just mentioned. He's going to do a lot of hard work on it and then provide it to the machine learning engineer or the data scientist. And then the data scientist will start training the models, maybe do a bit of feature cleaning here and there, and then train the models, train the algorithms, which are the mathematical principles that I discussed about earlier. Once that is done, then the model can be you can present it to the the ML architect. The ML architect is the person who's leading the entire project. Okay, what does an architect do? An architect lays the foundation, lays the structure of a whole system, be it a building, be it a bridge or anything. So an ML architect will lay the foundation or the whole outlet of the machine learning project. All of this is very complicated if it is done on different levels, on different systems, and different, like I code using Python, and I could be working with a machine learning engineer who only knows to code on R. Well, I shouldn't be boasting of it. Even I only know to code on Python, but that's how it's going to create a problem, right? So there could be a data engineer who knows who works on certain tools like MySQL and stuff like that, and maybe I'm not very well acquainted with it, although a data scientist is meant to be acquainted with it. So these are all the factors, like these ifs and buts come in, and that is where MLOps is going to help you, because it is creating an end-to-end principle. Now let us identify the benefits of MLOps. So let's identify MLOps theoretically. I've been giving you the problems. I've talked about machine learning as a whole. What is MLOps going to do? Okay. MLOps, machine learning operations. Now this is where I would request everybody to pay more attention, because now we are actually discussing what MLOps is all about. Okay. Then I'll come to these parts. Okay. As to how it's helping us with risk mitigation, responsible AI, scaling. These are some principles which it helps us with. But how does MLOps actually help us, or what is it all about? Now, MLOps is going to create a common platform, okay, on a certain, you can say a cloud platform, okay, it's going to be there on a cloud platform. It's going to be a common platform for all these people to come in. Which people? The people of the organization. We are going to be, like, towards the end of the session, I'm going to be discussing how each person benefits from MLOps. But before that, it's important for us to know how MLOps deals with this. Okay, so MLOps is an end-to-end process wherein I have a business problem statement. I know that there are certain parameters. There is data which is there. This data is going to come in. This data is going to be fed, and the automation process starts off from there. Okay, the automation process starts off from there, because it is you can say a cousin of DevOps. It is going to continuously integrate and deploy all the changes which are there. To begin with, MLOps will work similar to what we've discussed in the life cycle. It is going to get the data. There is going to be data, cleaning. Everything will be happening. The feature extraction will be there. The feature selection, the proper features will be selected, and everything will be right in front of you in an automated way. And then comes in the continuous integration and continuous deployment part. Okay, so there is something which is changing in the outside world, which you don't need to worry about, because MLOps is doing it for you. What is changing? I'm going to be discussing it immediately after this. But for you to understand MLOps is that it is creating a common platform for an end-to-end process. So MLOps is basically going to be the start point and the end point, and with minimal intervention. Obviously, all the logs and everything that's going on in the backend will be right there in front of you. You'll be able to watch the entire life cycle happening in front of you. Okay. Now, if it has continuous integration and continuous deployment, which we generally the common term is CI/CD, then how is it different from DevOps? Why am I, why have I spoken about MLOps for nearly 35 minutes now? And all I have said right now is CI/CD, and it still does not come up with anything extra. CI/CD was being done by DevOps also. What is the need of coming up with MLOps? There is a third aspect, guys. The third aspect is retraining of the models. Okay, so there is a CT that comes in, which is continuous training, and this monitoring, there is a CT and CM, which is continuous training and continuous monitoring, which happens. Okay, this retraining of the models continuously happens, which is why it is different from DevOps. Okay, so not only are you relying on MLOps for the integration and the deployment part, it is automatically retraining your models which you had already trained. If you remember, I just said that you're sitting at home, you're doing some amazing coding on Jupyter Notebook. The moment you look at it, you see that, oh my God, it's 97%. That's like 10% more than my high secondary marks. Let's deploy it. It's going really well. Within a certain period of time, you will see that, oh my God, it's gone down. Why does that happen? There are certain factors, which is exactly the use case which I'll discuss after this. Okay, so what is MLOps helping us to do? First and foremost, it is eliminating the risk which is associated with a particular business problem statement. When I am a company and I want to use machine learning, a particular machine learning algorithm or a particular machine learning model to help me with certain predictions, I'm taking a huge risk. I am asking a non-living thing to predict my future. Humans can't do it. How will you expect a machine to do it? It's a non-living thing. So do you get the generalized risk associated with it? So to mitigate the risk, I'm not saying it's going to eliminate it, but there will be a massive reduction in the whole risk. Okay, so what it does is basically you have all the things happening in front of you. So machine learning operations. Imagine you have a particular process laid down in front of you, and everything is happening in front of you. The moment you find there is some error at some point, that error is going to come up automatically. Okay, as an alert that, oh my God, something is wrong. Please look into it. Imagine how amazing a system like that would be. Like you don't have to, dig deep into it and see where is the error. Oh my God, what went wrong? Or maybe we've seen this, right, guys? So many errors that come up and we have to go to Stack Overflow and oh my God, where's the error? What is this? Of course, Python will tell us there is an error in line 23, but how can we eliminate it? There are so many different aspects associated with it. Okay. Exactly what MLOps does is it will throw up these errors. There will be a proper logging which happens on the console. You'll be able to debug the errors right then and there. Okay, and everything is happening in the automated way. Fine. The next part comes in, which is responsible AI. So guys, this is a term which is a business standard for most of the companies. Responsible artificial intelligence is it's a combination of two concepts, which is a standard which is maintained in all business organizations. Is that any bit of code or any bit of software or sophisticated material or information that you share with your authorities who are probably not from a, you can say, coding background, it has to have two components: intentionality and accountability. If you observe, these are the 2 points that I've mentioned here. It should have intentionality and accountability. What are these two things? Intentionality comes from the word intention. So when you frame the particular code for a machine learning use case, it should solve the purpose. And secondly, even if you're explaining it, or some non-coding person, like somebody who's not built the whole pipeline, is trying to explain it, should be able to explain it. MLOps helps you to do that because all the logs are there in front of you. Everything is happening right there in front of you. You can keep a track on the processes, and you will know that, okay, this is the particular place where a certain error has come up. This is where the second component comes in, which is accountability. When there are audits taking place in companies, where there are different processes, high-end analysis which is going on in a company, that one of the seniors just walks into the cabin and says that, okay, I want to analyze everything that's going on. I want to see how work is proceeding, how everybody is working. See, there is a very good or very easy way to, catch that error. Where is that? Whether it's in the data engineering component or the data engineering part, whether it's in the model training part, whether it's in the data pre-processing part, whether it's in the model evaluation or data validation or model validation part, everything, because it's so very well organized and staged, that you can find the error and you can trace the error very well. Okay, so these are a couple of advantages of MLOps. The last point here is very easy, of course, scaling. Guys, when you're making up or coming up with a business, solution. When you are deploying a model, when you are watching a particular model getting deployed, it is not restricted to one or two or three use cases. There are hundreds of such models, or hundreds of such parallel operations which are going on for you to give you a successful operating system. Okay, so for that, like for example, take a look, take into this example. Like, think of a particular child who's watched the game of cricket and knows everything and has started playing cricket in the gully. Okay, gully cricket is very popular in Mumbai, and we're playing gully cricket, and he's like the best cricketer in his society, for instance. What is the probability that this person will go to the Ranji team of Maharashtra and do exceptionally well? It's like the chances of that are low, right? Why? Because the scale has gone up, the domain is diverse, the difficulty is more. So that is how machine learning operations helps. That not only for one, two, or three parallel running operations, even if it's like a proper use case on a vast platform, it is going to help you. It is going to let you maintain a certain level of accuracy. Even if the accuracy is going down, it is going to help you to bring it back up. Okay. Let me come to a certain use case, and after that, guys, so for those who have not deployed a machine learning model anytime in the past, I've used the word deploy too many times now, so just using the word won't help. Right after this, I'm going to be deploying a small use case for you guys, so that you know how a machine learning algorithm is deployed and how it is used globally. Okay, I'm going to be doing something right now after this slide is explained. I'm going to be doing something right now on my system. I'm sitting in Mumbai right now, and anywhere you are, I can share the link with you and you will be able to access it right from your system. And trust me, guys, it's a very basic use case that I've laid on my system. Okay, so please get excited. Let us come to this. The next slide. I'll just come to the meet and check out some messages maybe. Okay, yeah. So if we talk about monitoring, okay, now this question is often asked to me that I have trained my model. My model is trained. I was working on a certain use case. I have trained my model very well. Now, why is there a need for me to train my model again? Okay, why is there a need for me to train my model again? I will ask any one or two people from the audience if you can just give me a yes, that yes, sir, I have this question. I mean, why does this happen? Once I've trained my model, once a machine learning model or algorithm is trained, why do I need to train it again? I don't want the answer, guys. I just want you to come on the microphone and say that yes, I have this doubt, or yes, I have this question. Why is this happening? So that I know that there are people who have had this question come up in their mind. Is there anybody from the audience? I would love to hear them out.
Yeah, Shavni, I do have this.
Okay.
Like
Okay.
we have the model trained, we have deployed it. Like what can go possibly wrong that we have to train this thing again?
Okay. So that is precisely the question that will come up in anybody's mind. That what can possibly go wrong in this, or why do I need to retrain the model? Now let's think of it like this, guys. So I'm coming back to cricket over and over again. For those who are cricket non-lovers or not very much interested in cricket or some other sport, pardon me. I myself am a hardcore football freak, but not everybody watches football like that. So cricket is the more safe option in India. Okay, so coming to your question, or rather the question which I posed, and you probably give me a +1 on that. Think of it like this, guys. Virat Kohli in the early 2000s must have been in his school. I don't remember how old he is. So in the early 2000s must have been in his school and was learning cricket and was doing very well. Okay, he was doing great. I guess Delhi. He used to play for Delhi. He comes from Delhi. He was doing very well. He was with his coach, and the coach was training him every day in, day out. That this is how you place your elbow. This is how your backlift should be. This is how you should move in the crease. This is how you should play your shots. So Virat Kohli has had aced everything, and in 2008, I guess he made his debut against Sri Lanka, and he scored a half century. He opened the game and he did really well. Over time, do you guys think Virat Kohli in 2008 versus Virat Kohli in 2021 has played the same shots throughout? I would like to interact on the chat screen maybe. Okay. No. So yeah, my question was, guys, you can come up on the chat box. I have the chat screen over here. I can see. So do you think Virat Kohli throughout has been playing the same shots? Okay. No, 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 no. Correct. Of course. Not possible, right? He has had to develop, or you could say, adjust or adapt to certain changes. Okay, now what are these changes? Where does this change come from? Because the bowler is bowling the same ball, maybe some balls here and there. The shots can't change, right? Who said the shots can't change? Virat Kohli was very happy. Like he would get a full toss, he would flick it, and then he would get a boundary. Okay, he would easily get a boundary. Okay, ground weather, right. This could be bowler, pitch, experience and practice. Yeah, experience and practice happens time and again. But what are the constraints? There could be the bowler, some mystery bowler like Ajanta Mendis or a Sunil Nareen. Okay, these are extremely tough bowlers to play against. Rashid Khan, he's come up, he's doing really well. So that has come up. So that is the constraint from the outside world. Now let me give you one tricky fact over here. Virat Kohli, even though these bowlers are tricky, they are still bowling the same type of ball, right? An off spinner will bowl an off spin ball which would come into the right hander. It's still going same, but suddenly out of the blue in 2014, a certain Tilakaratne Dilshan, a player called Tilakaratne Dilshan, comes up with a shot which is called a Dil Scoop, wherein he hits the ball behind him, and the ball goes below, on top of the wicket keeper, and it goes for a boundary or a six. Did that shot exist in the textbooks of cricket before that? Maybe it did, maybe it did not, but nobody played it before that. I mean, in 2003, 2007 World Cup, I don't remember a single player trying it. Maybe something close to a paddle sweep or a sweep which goes at the back, but this is something different. Then in 2016, AB de Villiers comes in and he reverse sweeps someone for a six. Okay, a reverse sweep scoop. Kevin Peterson in 2011 started switching hands, like a right-handed batsman switches hands and plays a reverse hook shot for six. So not only is the condition changing, the shots, which is the data on which this particular batsman was trained, is also changing. So here we go, guys. I'll go back to the slide. Over time, data changes. Over time, data changes, and therefore the model's performance will decrease. The model was trained on a certain data set, and now with time, the data has changed. Okay, how many of you, I mean, I'm not even going to be asking this question. I know the answer, but just for the sake of it, I'll ask it. Imagine, guys, like whatever YouTube interaction you've had in the last 4 years, or 3 years, or 2 years, imagine, or maybe forget that, like January this year and July, it's already July. In the last 7 months, try to remember opening the YouTube app in January versus opening the YouTube app now. Do you get the same recommendations, guys? I'm sure you don't. Because with time, the views, what you watch changes. What you like changes, what you dislike changes. Everything changes. Data is constantly changing. So how will this YouTube algorithm know that? Or maybe like you used to watch Sadhguru videos a lot, but now since you're into data science and everything, you're watching a lot of data science videos. 5 recommendations are that life is all about sanctity and peace and stuff like that. You'll be like, what is that? I've come here to watch some machine learning algorithm. Of course, with all due respect, I respect everything that Sadhguru says, but at the moment, I need to learn about random forest. Okay, so that is how the whole setup comes in, guys. Data is changing continuously. Okay, if I give you a very good example, imagine a certain Mr. XYZ was asked to build a model that would predict the air quality index. Please hear me out clearly. The air quality index, AQI, of Mumbai, Calcutta, Jaipur, these cities, and was asked to build a model or deploy a model in 2020 March, 1st March, or maybe 2020 February. This person was asked to build a model that will predict the air quality index of a particular city, and without any intervention. He did it on his system. He took data since 2000 and trained his model on 20 years of data. I think that's more than enough. And then he put it on deployment. What happened in 2020 March? Lockdown. Does your machine learning model know the term COVID? Forget that. You're typing an email and you mention COVID-19. There is a red tick. There's a red line under it. Even the autocorrect does not identify COVID-19 as a word as of yet. At least yesterday only I was sending someone an email and I saw that popped up. So forget your machine learning model. It's been 1.5 years and even the autocorrect is putting a red line under it. How will your machine learning model know that there is a certain COVID? So, dude, there's going to be a change in the whole scenario. No, it doesn't work like that. How does it work? So, the model, although in 2020, March, April, May, June, July, the air quality index improved drastically because everybody was inside. There was no pollution. There was very little pollution. But this model is predicting that, oh my God, it's going to be terrible. Oh my God, May, June, July in Mumbai is going to be acid rain. Stay away, guys. Whereas, since the pollution was less, the acid content in the atmosphere was much less. The model is not able to identify all of it. Now, how does machine learning operations comes into it? Look at this diagram, guys. Okay, the F1 measure is a matrix in machine learning. Okay, F1 measure is a matrix which gives you the accuracy. Okay, can anybody from the audience tell me what F1 measure is? Just randomly asking. If you don't know, that's not a problem. Can anybody give me the answer? What is F1 measure? What is F1 score? No worries, no worries. I'll tell you what exactly happens. It's a classification metric, okay? What F1 measure basically does is, I'll try to keep it in simple layman's language. You have a certain model which is making predictions. How accurately it makes those predictions is the accuracy score. Now, there are certain terms known as true positive, true negative, false positive, and false negative. Based on these terms, now what is a true positive? Like actually it was a positive and the machine also predicted it as a positive. Actually it was negative, but the machine predicted it as a positive. So can we call it a false positive? Okay. It was actually negative and the machine predicted it as a negative. So it's a true negative. And it was actually a positive, but the machine predicted it as a negative. So it's a false negative. Okay. This may sound jumbled up. You can always learn about these things from various sources, guys. What you need to know is that the F1 measure gives you the accuracy, how accurate a model is. Okay. Now just observe this diagram. Okay. So this is a certain person who's deployed a model in September or maybe a month before that, and it had almost 80% accuracy. And then it is going down. It is going down with time. As we come to October, it has gone down below a certain point. Now, this certain point is the performance threshold. It's denoted by the letter tau, by the symbol tau. Okay, and it is the model performance threshold. What it does is it tells you that, oh my God, below this the model can't go. Okay, so you could say that this is the threshold set by the father of a very, very strict student, saying that, okay, a very strict father, sorry, the student can't be strict, pardon. So the student's father is very strict and he said that if you come back home with a less than 55% score, don't enter my house. Okay, so now the student has assigned a teacher who's going to always help the student the moment the student's performance degrades. The student is the machine learning algorithm, the teacher is ML ops. What is it going to do? The moment we see that the first version, now he's deployed the first version, okay, so the student has appeared for the first term exam and he's seen that his performance is degrading with time. The moment the performance degrades with time, the teacher comes in, the teacher trains the student that, oh my God, you're doing bad, oh my God, please buck up. There is some new additions in your syllabus, which is the new data which has been fed to the model. There are new additions in your syllabus, please work hard next time. And the student's performance goes up almost to 100%. But again, the syllabus keeps changing, the new chapters keep coming in and the student's performance degrades. So now version 2 of the model is not working fine, which means that the term 2 exam also of the student has not worked well. Again, the teacher comes in and the model is trained and again he attains a better score now. He almost attains 100%. Again, it comes down. So it continuously happens. That's not a problem because machine learning enables you versioning. Okay, this was the first version, did not work after a time, no problem, we'll change it. Second version, did not work after some time, no problem, we'll change it. And this continues over and over again. Okay, so over time, you will see that the model performance is always going to fluctuate, but ideally the threshold is not kept so below. Obviously the threshold, I mean, imagine a strict father would never accept a child's 55% score. It will ideally be 80%. But don't come back home if you don't get 80%, right? So ideally we could keep it at 80%. This is just a brief depiction of how the monitoring condition works. So MLOps is continuously monitoring this particular model. The moment the performance degrades, it updates it, like you see that notification every morning that 11 apps have been updated. Similarly, this model has been updated, and then we come up with a new model. Okay, the same model, a new version comes in, to be honest. Again it degrades, again it goes back up. Look at this nice depiction graphically, and this can continue with time. So now, although the machine learning algorithm does not know COVID, because of the behavioral pattern in the data, it will automatically adjust itself to the new data pattern. Maybe it will take some time, because March, April, May, June, it will take some time for it to succumb to that whole change in data, but it will eventually come back to its best. Okay, so that is one use case, that is one monitoring benefit that machine learning operations help us with. Okay, so that pretty much is the first part of it. Let us do some